The Zorgans. For millions of years, the name inspired fear and dread across the galaxy. This advanced alien species had carved a path of conquest through the stars, enslaving or annihilating every civilization unfortunate enough to fall within their sights. Their technology was unrivaled, their weapons unmatched. With each new world they subjugated, the Zorgans grew more powerful, more arrogant in their dominance. At the heart of the Zorgan war machine was their mastery of biotechnology. Rather than mechanical starships and robots, the Zorgans engineered living spacecraft and creatures from organic materials far beyond the understanding of lesser species. Their ships were massive, semi-sentient leviathans that could repair themselves from injury, adapt their attacks, and spew out swarms of vicious bioweapons. Zorgan soldiers themselves were genetically enhanced monstrosities, towering brutes with armored hides, razor claws, and an unquenchable thirst for slaughter. For millennia, they seemed unstoppable as they cut a swath of devastation across the Milky Way. This was the threat that humanity suddenly found itself facing. In the year 2187, unbeknownst to most people on Earth, a lone Zorgan scout ship stumbled upon the solar system. Its crew observed the young human civilization, with its flourishing colonies on Mars, Luna, and the Jovian moons. They studied humanity's early fusion drives and mass accelerator weapons, and they were not impressed. "The humans are pathetic," spat Commander Zolrath, the scout ship's leader, as his baleful orange eyes glared at the viewscreen filled with data on Earth's defenses. Barely a century of spaceflight and their ships still crawl at sublight speeds. They have no idea of the forces that rule this galaxy. His lieutenant, a hulking monster named Carr, chuckled cruelly. "They will make excellent cattle and labor stock for the hive." He growled, saliva glistening on his fangs. "Shall I alert the swarm to ready an invasion fleet?" Zolrath raised a clawed hand. "Patience. The humans may be primitive, but they breed prodigiously. This system hosts nearly 10 billion of them. A decent stock if managed properly. We will take the choice specimens for the gene vats, turn a portion into loyal mutant soldiers, and save the rest for entertainment." He tapped a command into the organic control console, bringing up a schematic of the solar system. Compared to the Zengi Alliance or the Corutha Concilium, these humans will hardly put up a fight. We'll send a single battle hive. No need to waste the bulk of our forces on such a backwater. With the element of surprise, Earth should fall within a cycle. The alien warship slunk back out beyond the Oort cloud, vanishing into the interstellar dark to set the plan in motion, confident in the impending demise of humanity. But the Zorgans, in their arrogance, failed to study mankind closely enough. They saw only technological metrics on their scans and charts. What they missed were the fiercer qualities of the human spirit, the indomitable will to survive, the capacity to unite in the face of destruction, and the burning drive to defend home and family at all costs. These were the strengths that would soon be put to the ultimate test as the people of Earth faced an apocalyptic onslaught they scarcely imagined. Earth prepares for war. The first warning came from the Lunar Farside Observatory. Astronomer Mai Xiang nearly spilled her coffee when the anomaly popped up on her night shift scan. A cluster of massive objects had appeared out beyond Neptune and were accelerating sunward at impossible speeds. She ran the numbers 3 times before sounding the alarm. Within an hour, the solar system was on high alert as news of the approaching Zorgan invasion spread. Panicked citizens watched the skies in terror as Earth's leaders scrambled to mount a defense. The great powers put aside their rivalries and united against the common threat. Old grievances over borders and resources faded to insignificance in the face of potential extinction. The New World Defense Council, a hasty assemblage of American, Chinese, EU, and other military leaders, met in a crisis summit to strategize. They faced a grim picture. Earth's space forces numbered only a few dozen armed ships against a projected 1,000 Zorgan vessels. Conventional missiles and kinetics would be nearly useless against the invaders' advanced biotech. "Our only hope is to strike with overwhelming nuclear force," The moment the Zorgons enter Earth orbit, declared U.S. Space Force Admiral Graves, we concentrate our ships into a single massive volley and pray it's enough to at least cripple them. And if it's not enough, asked General Liu of China, we'll be left defenseless. Then we fight them on the ground, growled the admiral. We disperse our forces now, hide them where we can. If the Zorgons land, we bleed them city by city, mountain by mountain. We make them pay for every inch of our world. As the grim-faced council laid out its desperate battlefield plans, Earth's greatest scientific minds launched their own frenzied efforts. Researchers and engineers converged in secret labs and chamber their orders, find some vulnerability to the Zorgons, devise new weapons, uncover any strategy to save humanity. At MIT, a team led by quantum computing pioneer Aditi Singh worked around the clock to probe the Zorgon communications intercepted by the SETI arrays. If they could just crack the aliens' data encryption, perhaps Earth could predict their battle plans. In Shenzhen, under the tightest security ever seen, a deadly new nanoweapon that could turn Zorgon bioships into slurry was feverishly prototyped. And at CERN, in the bowels of the ancient Large Hadron Collider, a group of the brightest physicists on Earth frantically tried to master an experimental warp drive design, one that could allow Earth ships to maneuver faster than light, perhaps the only real edge against the invaders. Elsewhere on Earth, everyday citizens did what they could to prepare. In bomb shelters and remote cabins, families stocked up on supplies, said tearful goodbyes, and prayed to their gods. Young men and women reported to recruitment stations in droves, determined to fight for their world. Hardened veterans steeled themselves grimly, knowing all too well the horrors to come. This would be a battle like no other in human history. Doomsday had arrived, and everyone had to be ready to sacrifice all for Earth's survival. As the dreaded Zorgon warships closed in, now crossing the orbit of Mars and aiming directly for Earth, humanity braced for the fight of its life, a life that now seemed more precious and precarious than ever. The invasion begins. On August 29, 2187, the skies over Earth burned as the Zorgon war swarm arrived. Grotesque bioships, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence, swept out of the darkness of space like a plague of unimaginable scale. They swarmed over the planet's poles in seething masses, disgorging legions of monstrous warriors, and hovering menacingly over the world's great cities. In low Earth orbit, the United Earth Defense Fleet unleashed its assault, hundreds of nuclear missiles arcing up from hidden silos and streaking towards the Zorgon vanguard. For a moment, as the silent fireballs blossomed in space, engulfing dozens of alien vessels, it seemed humanity might have a chance. But the Zorgons absorbed the losses with little effect. Their amorphous bioships flowed back together, sealing breaches and regenerating at terrifying speed. Swarms of smaller attack craft spewed forth, whirling towards the human fleet like razor-toothed piranhas. The space battle devolved into a brutal melee, human ships desperately pouring railgun fire and missiles into the attacking biocraft, destroying scores of them, but losing vessels of their own with each passing minute. The Zorgon attack ships spat sprays of bioacid and clouds of flesh-eating spores, melting hull plating and leaving human crews screaming. On the bridge of the EDS Athena, the Defense Fleet's flagship, Admiral Graves watched the tactical displays fluctuate wildly as ship after ship winked out. "Calm," he barked at a ashen-faced officer. "Any word on that warp drive from CERN? Or those Shenzhen nanoweapons?" The officer shook his head grimly. "Negative, sir. They haven't." A flare of green light on the view screen interrupted him. The Zorgon bioships were disgorging swarms of pods, fat pulsing things that plummeted down through the atmosphere, trailing noxious smoke. London, New York, Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, population centers around the globe quickly fell under the shadow of descending alien landers. "They're sending in the ground troops," Graves growled. "And we're out of nukes. COM. Flash an evacuation order worldwide. All civilian ships are to lift off immediately. Anyone that can get to orbit, go. Mars, the Jovians, anywhere but Earth. As the bridge crew hastened to relay the retreat order, the admiral gripped the arm of his command chair tightly, his jaw clenching as he prepared to make the hardest call of his life. The fleet was being decimated. Any minute now, a Zorgan breaching pod would burn through their hull. The only option was the grim last resort that had been drilled into him. "This is Admiral Graves to all EDF personnel," he intoned into the fleet comm, his voice heavy. "Command code Ragnarok Omega. Scuttle your ships. Wipe your computers. Survivors planetside. Continue the fight on the ground. Make them bleed for every step. Graves out." As the orders flashed out, the doomed admiral watched the view screen, waiting for the inevitable. The lunar shipyards were engulfed in flames as Earth's last orbital defenses cracked. Drop pods smashed down in cities planet-wide, hatches blasting open to release hordes of roaring, slathering Zorgan monstrosities. Just as a massive Zorgan mothership loomed into view over the Athena, Graves thought of his family taking shelter back in Ohio. He thought of his daughter's brave eyes as he chipped off to the fleet, promising to save the world. Hot tears stung his eyes as the view screen flared blindingly. From hidden bunkers and camouflaged bases around the globe, Earth's surviving forces watched the defense fleet wink out of existence in orbit. The full might of the alien horde was now turning towards the ground, their numbers unscathed. Soldiers, militia, and armed civilians looked to the burning skies with dread, clutching their weapons and steeling themselves for bloodshed, praying for deliverance from the unthinkable nightmare that had come to Earth. Humanity's desperate gambit. In the smoldering ruins of the MIT quantum labs, Aditi Singh choked back a sob of despair as she surveyed the destruction. Just minutes ago, a Zorgan lander had torn through the building, its vile occupants slaughtering the few defenders before rampaging out into the streets of Cambridge. Singh's team had barricaded themselves in the deepest lab and could only listen helplessly to the screams and alien roars filtering down from above. They had failed. Despite days of desperate effort, the Zorgan communications cipher remained unbroken. Without access to the alien battlenet, Earth had no way to predict and counter their battle plans. It seemed humanity's last best hope was lost. Singh was just about to sink to her knees when her assistant Miguel burst into the lab, his eyes wide. "Dr. Singh, you have to see this." He thrust a cracked tablet into her hands. On the flickering screen was a schematic of what looked like the interior of a Zorgan bioship, a twisting labyrinth of organic chambers pulsing with eerie light. "Where did you get this?" Singh breathed, hardly believing what she was seeing. Miguel grinned. "Cracked their black box data recorder. When the ship crashed into the building, it created a momentary fault in their security permissions. I managed to pull a partial schematic of their ship systems before it locked back up." Singh enlarged the display, her eyes poring over the intricate details, neurons firing as she processed the Zorgan ship structure. Then she saw it, a large fibrous mass at the heart of the vessel, the core that seemed to control all systems. Synapses of a central processing unit, the ship's brain. There, she jabbed a finger at the screen. "That looks like a weakness, some sort of neural plexus. If we could inject a disruptive signal or virus there, we could disable an entire ship at once," Miguel finished, expression now one of building excitement. Maybe the whole fleet." Singh straightened up, a plan taking shape. It was beyond desperate, beyond risky, but it was a chance. "We need to get this to STRAT Suam. And I think I know how we can upload a virus to the Zorgan fleet." As Singh hastily explained her scheme, the surviving MIT team sprang into action, frantically coding a potent cybernetic virus and hailing any surviving Defense Force units. If they could just get a strike team onto one of those bioships. Half a world away, in the cratered remains of the Cheyenne Mountain bunker, Colonel Jack Rourke of the EDF Marine Corps pulled himself out of the rubble, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. He and his platoon had barely survived the orbital bombardment that had cracked open Norade like an egg. Most of High Command was dead. The few functioning consoles showed a landscape of despair. Zorgans landing in force around the globe, human defenders outnumbered and outmatched. Rourke gritted his teeth, steeling himself to lead a hopeless last stand, when the bunker's emergency comm crackled to life. "This is Dr. Aditi Singh of MIT. We have a plan to disable the Zorgan fleet, but we need a strike force to board one of their ships. Any EDF forces still combat capable, please respond." The Marine colonel grabbed the comm handset. "This is Colonel Rourke, EDF Marine Corps. We read you, MIT. Give me the details." As Singh hurriedly outlined the audacious scheme, Rourke gathered his surviving Marines, a hard glint of determination in his eyes. One desperate, all-or-nothing assault on a Zorgan ship, a handful of humans against the most terrifying aliens the galaxy had ever known. One last chance to save Earth. "Aura, Marines," Rourke roared. "Gear up and check your ammo. We're gonna shove a boot up these Zorgan sobs where the suns don't shine. Move out. Victory for Earth." In a daring raid, Colonel Rourke and his Marine strike team fought their way onto one of the grounded Zorgan bioships in the Rocky Mountain foothills. With Dr. Singh guiding them via radio, they blasted and battled through the nightmarish interior of the living ship, its twisted passages teeming with vicious alien defenders. Dozens of Marines fell to sprays of molecular acid and slashing Zorgan claws, but Rourke and a handful of survivors finally punched through to the central neural nexus. As monstrous aliens closed in on all sides, the Colonel plugged Dr. Singh's cybernetic virus into the bioship's pulsing organic CPU. For a moment, nothing happened, and it seemed all was lost. Then the fleshy walls of the bioship began to shudder and twitch. Eerie shrieks echoed through the passages as the vessel's systems seized up, and it started to dissolve from the inside. The invading Zorgans wailed in agony, collapsing and convulsing as their cybernetic implants turned against them. And it wasn't just the one ship. The virus propagated at light speed through the Zorgan's quantum communication network, leaping from vessel to vessel in the blink of an eye. Across Earth's skies, the alien warships started to fail and fall, crashing down in mountains, oceans, and cities as the nanovirus ravaged their neural networks. Earth's defenders watched in stunned amazement as their horrific foe faltered and flailed. Then a resounding cheer went up around the globe as the true impact sunk in. The Zorgans had been dealt a crippling blow. Humanity had a fighting chance. But there were still thousands of Zorgan troops on the ground, and without their ships they fought with tripled savagery. The war became a brutal slog of urban combat and guerrilla strikes as humans took the fight to the invaders. In shattered cities from Beijing to Buenos Aires, young and old took up arms against the alien menace. It was a war of survival, primal and merciless. At last, after months of blood and fire, the tide turned for good. Shorn of reinforcements and whittled down by ceaseless human attacks, the Zorgan ground forces finally broke. Their field commanders, seeing no possibility of victory or escape, began to surrender to Earth militaries. Rourke himself marched the last of the snarling, sullen aliens into prisoner camps at gunpoint. In the aftermath, as the world began the slow process of rebuilding, the magnitude of what humanity had achieved started to sink in. Against all odds, the people of Earth had turned back a foe that had crushed 1,000 worlds before them. They had looked into the maw of extinction, and through courage, sacrifice, and unity, found the strength to endure. Amidst the rubble and ruin, a new sense of global purpose emerged, a grim determination to remain vigilant, to rebuild, to expand to the stars, and ensure Earth would never again be so vulnerable. What the Zorgans had begun as an invasion, humanity would finish as a triumph, an ascendance. In the face of the worst imaginable threat, mankind had found its greatest strengths. Earth would never be the same, its trajectory as a civilization forever altered. But for today, there was cause for celebration. The celebration of survival against all odds, of a species that had clawed its way back from the brink to grasp a greater destiny. The first step of that journey would be to honor the fallen, those who had given their lives so that humanity might live. At a memorial ceremony in Geneva, before a sea of weeping faces from every nation, Admiral Graves' daughter laid a wreath in honor of her father and all the lost defenders of Earth. There were no words that could capture the magnitude of their sacrifice and the depth of their courage. But one thing was certain: as the sun rose over a wounded but unbroken world, they would never be forgotten. Humanity would carry their memory and their valor forward to the stars and beyond.